Dok Sjedinjene Američke Države prijete udarima na iranske elektrane, Iran uzvraća prijetnjama napadima na energetsku, telekomunikacijsku infrastrukturu povezanu s američkim kapitalom. Teheran je odbio Trumpov mirovni plan tražeći priznanje suvereniteta nad Hormuškim tjesnacem, čime diplomatske tenzije, ali i rat u regiji dodatno eskaliraju. Penzionisani potpukovnik američkog zračnog korpusa Berni Flauers, veteran s misijama u Iraku, Afganistanu i Ukrajini, analizira strategiju Sjedinjenih Američkih Država i Izraela protiv Irana, ističući asimetrične taktike Teherana, ali i globalne posljedice. Zašto su saveznici odbili da se pridruže Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama u zaljevu? Velika Britanija je domaćin i međunarodne konferencije posvećene ponovnom otvaranju upravo Hormuškog tjesnaca. Navedeno je da je 35 država potpisalo zajedničku izjavu o obnovi pomorske sigurnosti. I za kraj, 4 astronauta započela su visokorizični let oko mjeseca, prvo putovanje čovečanstva prema mjesecu nakon više od pola stoljeća. To je uzbudljiv početak nasilnog plana koji vodi ka ponovnom slijetanju na mjesec za 2 godine. Ja sam Ika Ferrer-Gotić, ovo je Puls Planete. Iran je zaprijetio napadima na energetsku infrastrukturu i telekomunikacijske kompanije u regiji povezane s američkim kapitalom. Ukoliko Sjedinjene Američke Države nastave prijetiti udarima na iranske elektrane, čime dodatno raste napetost u ratu koji traje 5. sedmicu. Kako prenosi državna televizija Press TV, Teheran će odgovoriti na svaki potez Vašingtona, upozorivši da bi mete mogle postati ključni sektori u državama Bliskog istoka. Iran je odbio mirovni plan koji je predložio američki predsednik, uključujući i njegovu ponudu za prekid vatre, nazivajući ga nerealnim i neprihvatljivim za Teheran. Umjesto toga, Iran je iznio svoj plan sa zahtjevima koji uključuju međunarodno priznanje njegovog suvereniteta nad ključnim Hormuškim tjesnacem, ali i druge uslove prije okončanja sukoba, odbacivši zapadne ultimatume. Ove diplomatske tenzije dolaze dok rat i dalje eskalira u regiji.
شروط ما برای خاتمه جنگ کاملا روشن است. ما آتش بس رو نمیپذیریم، بلکه به دنبال خاتمه کامل جنگ هستیم. نه تنها در ایران بلکه در کل منطقه. و ارائه تضمین‌های مبنی بر اینکه دوباره این تجاوزات صورت نگیره و همینطور پرداخت خسارات و غراماتی که باید پرداخته بشه مردم ایران به خاطر حجم خساراتی که به هر حال به ما وارد کرده. این اعتماد وجود نداره و برای اعتماد سازی قدم‌های بزرگی باید برداشته بشه تا شرایط به گونه‌ای مهیا بشه که اعتماد به یک مذاکره ایجاد بشه. اینکه جمهوری اسلامی ایران تصمیم بگیره یا نگیره بحث دیگری است.
Američki predsjednik Donald Tramp izjavio je da su američke snage u Iranu na dobrom putu da uskoro završe misiju, tvrdeći da su ključni strateški ciljevi gotovo ostvareni. U prvom nacionalnom obraćanju od početka rata branio je vojnu operaciju, najavio njen mogući završetak u naredne 2 do 3 sedmice. Istovremeno je poručio da će napadi na Iran biti nastavljeni. Rat koji traje od 28. februara izazvao je rast cijene energenata i pojačao pritisak javnosti na Bijelu kuću.
We totally obliterated those nuclear sites. The regime then sought to rebuild their nuclear program at a totally different location, making clear they had no intention of abandoning their pursuit of nuclear weapons. They were also rapidly building a vast stockpile of conventional ballistic missiles and would soon have had missiles that could reach the American homeland, Europe, and virtually any other place on Earth. Iran's strategy was so obvious. They wanted to produce as many missiles as possible, and they did, with the longest range possible, and they had some weapons that nobody believed they had. We just learned that out. We took them out. We took them all out so that no one would really dare stop them. And their race for a nuclear bomb, a nuclear weapon like nobody's ever seen before. They were right at the doorstep. For years, everyone has said that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons, but in the end, those are just words if you're not willing to take action when the time comes. As I stated in my announcement of Operation Epic Fury, our objectives are very simple and clear. We are systematically dismantling the regime's ability to threaten America or project power outside of their borders. That means eliminating Iran's Navy, which is now absolutely destroyed, hurting their Air Force and their missile program at levels never seen before, and annihilating their defense industrial base. We've done all of it. Their Navy is gone, their Air Force is gone, their missiles are just about used up or beaten. Taken together, these actions will cripple Iran military, crush their ability to support terrorist proxies, and deny them the ability to build a nuclear bomb. Our armed forces have been extraordinary. There's never been anything like it militarily. Everyone is talking about it, and tonight I'm pleased to say that these core strategic objectives are nearing completion. As we celebrate this progress, we think especially of the 13 American warriors who have laid down their lives in this fight to prevent our children from ever having to face a nuclear Iran.
A iz Trumpovog obraćanja naciji moglo se zaključiti da su Sjedinjene Američke Države postigle ključne ciljeve u Iranu, dok sukob i dalje eskalira u regiji, no skepticizam i dalje raste kako na domaćem, tako i na međunarodnom polju. Bez podrške velikih saveznika, prije svega Britanije i Francuske, Trump najavljuje okončanje rata za 2 do 3 sedmice. Naš dopisnik Ognjen Medić analizira strategiju Bijele kuće, reakcije na proteste, ključne političke turbulencije u administraciji. Ognjen mi se pridružuje iz Vašingtona. U ovim momentima, Ognjene, dobar ti dan. Evo iz Vašingtona mnogo vijesti. Šta se može zaključiti iz posljednjeg Trumpovog govora o Bijeloj kući, o ratu s Iranom i da li on sugeriše zaista skori završetak sukoba ili možda mogućnost eskalacije?
Dobar dan, Ike iz Vašingtona. Moram da ti kažem da za nas koji svakodnevno pratimo obraćanja predsjednika Donalda Trampa, ali i sve ono što se dešava u Vašingtonu, može se zaključiti iz njegovog novog govora ništa novo, da se tako izrazimo. Ono što smo imali priliku da čujemo iz posljednjeg obraćanja naciji upravo jeste da Sjedinjene Američke Države i vojska dominiraju na Bliskom istoku i upravo na taj neki emocionalni način Trump je američkoj naciji i američkim građanima zapravo predstavio da su Sjedinjene Američke Države jedna od najvećih vojnih sila u svetu. To isto smo mogli da čujemo i od Pita Hegseta pre 2 dana iz Pentagona, kada je i on takođe na veoma emocionalan način pokušao da predstavi koliko su Sjedinjene Države uspele da razore iransku vojsku i da zapravo praktično budu dominantne na Bliskom istoku. Koliko je to sada zaista istinito i da li je sve ono što se Trump, ali i sam vrh njegove administracije govori o sukobu u Iranu tačno, govori podatak isto da Teheran negira sve one pregovore koje Trump i njegova administracija zapravo guraju u prvi plan, ali jedno je sigurno jeste da se znatno smanjilo vojno delovanje sa iranske strane, što su saopštile zapravo i američke vojne i tajne službe, te da Sjedinjene Američke Države su u potpunosti uspele na neki način da čitavu vojnu infrastrukturu Irana razore. Ono što je Trump najavio jeste da će u naredne 2 do 3 nedelje biti okončan ovaj sukob, ali ako se samo prisetimo početka ovog sukoba, tako je bilo na samom početku. Svake 2-3 nedelje vrh američke administracije i sam predsednik Donald Trump govore da će ovaj rat biti okončan u naredne 2 do 3 nedelje, tako da ni u potpunosti nije jasno da li će i do ovog okončanja sukoba u narednom periodu doći. Ono što smo dobili kao, eto da kažem, jednu novu poruku jeste da će ova nedelja biti ključna i da je zapravo Iranu, ali i iranskoj strani predstavljeno nekoliko tačaka na koje moraju da pristanu kako bi zapravo američka strana okončala ovaj sukob i uspostavila potpuni prekid vatre. Za to vreme ono što može da se zaključi jeste da je dodatna vojna podrška poslata zapravo na Bliski istok i Sjedinjenih Država i da je iranska strana u Teheranu krenula da mobiliše takođe pešadijsku vojsku ukoliko do tog nekog kopnenog dejstvovanja američke vojske dođe, ali za sada još nije uvek poznato da li će i do toga doći i da se naravno ovde u američkoj javnosti spekuliše da li će do toga i doći.
Mi već sada znamo da je oko 50.000 američkih vojnika raspoređeno širom zaljeva, ali na Bliskom istoku Trump tvrdi da je Amerika, Sjedinjene Američke Države, da su već postigle pobjedu u Iranu, kao što kažeš. Na što on konkretno misli kada to kaže? Koliko je zaista realno očekivati onda kraj vojne operacije u naredne sedmice?
Kada Trump to kaže, on misli da su Sjedinjene Američke Države u potpunosti uništile vojnu infrastrukturu Irana, što i u neku ruku jeste zapravo tačno, ako je sudeći prema svim onim slikama koje vidimo, koje vojni američki vrh objavljuje svakodnevno i videa iz vazduha, kako oni uništavaju zapravo njihove vojne ciljeve. Jedno je sigurno, i to Amerika uvek stavlja u prvi plan, jeste da se Iranu mora zabraniti nuklearni program, da Iran ne sme da razvije nuklearni program, kao i da mora da mu se zabrani osiromašeni uranijum zapravo i bilo kakvo razvijanje u ovom pogledu. I jedno je sigurno da Trump i Pete Hegseth i čitava američka administracija to uvek nekako stavlja u prvi plan i da je to njima zapravo krajni cilj. Kada Trump kaže da oni pobeđuju, oni misli na to da su oni u potpunosti uništili čitavu njihovu infrastrukturu i da neće stati dok u potpunosti zapravo ne unište te njihove potencijalne nuklearne elektrane. Takođe, Trump je odgodio, da kažem, za 10 dana, sada smo već na nekom 7. danu, sve napade na njihova energetska postrojenja, dok ne dobije i konačan odgovor da je Iran i pristao na njihove zahteve. Tako da Trump kada kaže da pobeđuje, misli na to da je potpuno nesposobio iransku vojsku i to možemo nekako da zaključimo i da jeste tačno prema svemu sudeći što vidimo po slikama koje stižu upravo sa Bliskog istoka.
I prije nego što te pustim, Ogi, samo još jedno pitanje. Ipak, kakve su implikacije ostavke Pam Bondi na administraciju? Da li to signalizira unutrašnje trzavice u Bijeloj kući ili možda promjene u njegovom pravnom timu?
I kad moram da budem potpuno, da kažem, iskren sa tobom, da pored svih tih svetskih i globalnih problema koji se dešavaju, Trump se susreće sa veoma oštrim kritikama unutar svoje unutrašnje politike. Zapravo ovde u samom Vašingtonu pre samo nekoliko dana smenio je i Kristi Noem, a sada je smenio i Pam Bondi, prebacio je po njegovim rečima u privatni sektor. Koliko je to zapravo tačno, vidjet ćemo tek u narednim danima i ona se oglasila i potvrdila je upravo njenu smenu. Već je poznato i novo ime ko će je naslediti. Ovo sve nekako ide u tu ruku, da kažemo tako, da Trump zapravo nije zadovoljan svojim čelnim ljudima koje je postavio na početku svog drugog mandata i da se tektonske promene tek naslućuju i očekuju, da kažem, u tom drugom delu njegovog mandata. Kada prođu midterm izbori, vidjet ćemo šta će se zapravo i na njima desiti i da on zapravo nekako sluša i osluškuje, čini mi se, narod ovde u Sjedinjenim Državama koji tekako nisu bili zadovoljni ni Pam Bondi ni Kristi Noem, što zbog Epsteinovih fajlova, što zbog delovanja ICE agenata i svih ostalih stvari. Znamo da je i samo juče, evo u toku dana, Trump išao i do Vrhovnog suda kako bi saslušao zapravo novi zakon, taj koji se tiče rođenja deteta na američkom kontinentu, zapravo ovde u Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama i tog dobijanja papira nakon rođenja deteta. Vidjet ćemo šta će se dešavati svakako sa tim u narednom periodu. Jedno je sigurno da Trump sigurno nije bio zadovoljan vrhom upravo ovog sektora koje je Pam Bondi vodila i da je nekako osluškivao narod kada je ona u pitanju i da je zato došlo do ove smeje. To su spekulacije opet medija, vidjet ćemo kada se i jedno i drugo zvanično oglase i kada budu dobili novinarska pitanja na ovu temu zapravo šta će imati da kažu, ali da pored svih tih globalnih problema Trump se susreće i sa veoma velikim unutrašnjim problemima koje bi trebao da reši pre samih midterm izbora.
Sačekat ćemo, Ognjene. Hvala ti mnogo. Bio ovo naš reporter iz Vašingtona, Ognjen Merić. Ostanite uz nas. Britanski premijer Keir Starmer najavio je da će Velika Britanija biti domaćin međunarodne konferencije posvećene ponovnom otvaranju Hormuškog tjesnaca. Naveo je da je 35 država potpisalo zajedničku izjavu o obnovi pomorske sigurnosti. Naglasio je da ovo nije britanski rat.
Let me say once again, this is not our war. We will not be drawn into the conflict. That is not in our national interest. And the most effective way we can support the cost of living in Britain is to push for de-escalation in the Middle East and a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which is such a vital route for energy. To that end, we're exploring each and every diplomatic avenue that is available to us. The Foreign Secretary and the Chancellor have met their counterparts in the G7. The Defence Secretary has been in the Middle East speaking to our partners. And the UK has now brought together 35 nations around our statement of intent to push as one for maritime security across the Gulf. And today I can announce that later this week, the Foreign Secretary will host a meeting that brings those nations together for the first time, where we will assess all viable diplomatic and political measures that we can take to restore freedom of navigation, guarantee the safety of trapped ships and seafarers, and resume the movement of vital commodities. Following that meeting, we will also convene our military planners to look at how we can marshal our capabilities and make the Strait accessible and safe after the fighting has stopped.
Retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Berni Flauers, a combat veteran of nearly 21 years with deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Ukraine, former Pentagon advisor in national defense and cybersecurity and Maryland congressional candidate, is joining me from Columbia, Maryland at this moment. Colonel, thank you for joining me and welcome to Newsmax Balkans.
Thanks for having me.
With your direct combat experience in prolonged insurgencies and your recent analysis of Iranian asymmetric warfare, drones, proxies, and low-cost swarms, what military and human realities would the U.S. boots on the ground actually confront inside Iran, and what broader strategic or domestic consequences could such a commitment unleash for American forces and taxpayers?
Those are some pretty important and big questions. And first, I want to start off by saying I don't represent the United States government. I'm retired. This is me speaking as a private citizen. I'm retired from the military, retired from the government. But I do have 34 years of experience, and as you mentioned, I deployed and saw a lot of this. So with that said, putting boots on the ground is a whole different animal than flying over and dropping bombs. It's a lot more dangerous, and the Iranians have a lot of experience. It's like going into a home football game. The home team has the advantage when you go into the ground. So you've got snipers, you've got suicide bombs, you've got drones, all kinds of booby traps. You could have the greatest military in the world, but the Iranians are very, very adept at fighting stronger enemies, and we need to keep that in context as we think about going in. I still, even though we have thousands of troops deployed, I don't recommend boots on the ground. We need to keep that at a bare minimum. Keep that at a bare minimum. But there's a lot of things strategically that we are risking if we were to do that. I mean, there's drone swarms, and also the taxpayers are getting a huge bill because the Iranians are using relatively cheap weapons. Drones are not expensive. Mines are not expensive. When we respond to them in a lot of cases, we're using missiles that cost, millions of dollars. So we have to keep that into account because it could bankrupt us. We're already $38 trillion in debt, and we don't need to go any deeper into that.
And President Trump said in his speech that this war could last for another 2 to 3 weeks. But that's something that he said at the beginning of this war. He said 2 to 4 weeks maximum. And now we see it's over a complete month war with Iran. And you're obviously opposing the boots on the ground. And of course, there's this huge bill for the taxpayers, American taxpayers. What do you want the American public to understand, the world public to understand, that even if combat operations are over, the prolonged war could continue. What do you want the American public to understand that, about this prolonged operations from United States, Israel, of course, against Iran?
War is a very dangerous, I guess, the most dangerous thing you can do on the earth. And it is very, very unpredictable. And, you know, I understand where the president's coming from, and I support him. But telling people that we're going to have this done in 4 weeks is a little optimistic. And the American people need to understand that there are sacrifices that sometimes have to be made. And just the idea that this could go on for a long time. As I remember, you know, Vietnam, for example, lasted a very, very long time, several years, more than a decade. I was in the Iraq War. I was on active duty during both times. And, you know, the first one was very, very short, but the second went on for a long time. We were in Afghanistan for 20 years. So the concept of, oh, we're just going to go in there and push them around, that's not realistic. So the American people have to understand that. And they also have to understand that Iran potentially has the ability to reach out even to the United States. There are, you know, potential sleeper cells here. There's all kinds of other things that could be done remotely from their perspective. And we are very, very vulnerable as an American populace because we have a lot of technology, but that technology also makes us very vulnerable. So we have to be realistic and not think that this is just going to be some short engagement. We have to always prepare for the worst.
Joe Kent has recently said in his resignation that U.S. faced no imminent threat from Iran. What do you think about that? And are we looking, when we talk about prolonged war, are we looking at months, years, or even generational struggle? What metrics would signal true turning point for the United States?
It's hard to tell. It really, really is. Because first of all, Mr. Kent, I respect him greatly as a fellow soldier. But Iran has allies all over the world, just like America does. And so there's an opportunity. There's lots of people who support the Iranian regime that live right here in America, and they could cause all sorts of havoc if they chose to. We have to keep that in mind. So the idea of Iran posing no threat to us, that's not realistic. It's my concern. Remember, we're talking about the potential for nuclear, you know, Armageddon, and that's what we all have to keep into account. You know, the Iranians are trying to build a nuclear weapon. And even though it seems that they should have the ability to do what they wish, a nuclear weapon is a game changer because folks don't seem to understand if that were to happen, if a nuclear weapon was released, it wouldn't just be country to country. It would create a chain reaction that might destroy everyone on Earth, to tell you the truth, no matter where you are. It would make things miserable. So I don't agree with Mr. Kent there. What was the rest of the question? Make sure I'm
talking about metrics that would signal a true turning point for the United States, with, of course, drawing from your Pentagon tenure and threat assessments. What do you think about the metrics that could really signal the turning point for the United States in its war with Iran?
Well, of course, the Iranians saying that they want to have a ceasefire. If they said it and made an official public statement, that would be definitely something that you wanted to take into account. But, you know, their command and control and their leadership structure is very upset right now. A lot of those people that were in charge have been killed. So we're not 100% sure who's in charge, to tell you the truth. So them removing the mines from the Strait of Hormuz, those mines are very, very dangerous. Oil tankers can't go through, commerce can't go through. Them deactivating those mines would be a real metric right there to tell you that the war is over and we're back to normal. But if I saw that, I would be pretty sure that the war is over.
Iran has stated and rejected Trump's plan for ceasefire or lasting peace. and came up with a counter proposition, and that is Trump to resign from his position as a president of the United States, commander-in-chief, and of course the complete sovereignty of the Hormuz. And in your view, I want to talk about errors, of course. In your view, what are the most consequential strategic or tactical mistakes or errors that U.S. or Israel have made so far in this campaign, whether in intelligence assumptions, diplomatic consequences, sequencing, targeting priorities, or messaging? Or how have those errors already shaped the battlefield or eroded international support that we see lack of for the United States? We've seen alliances that have rejected to join Trump in this war against Iran.
Well, you just mentioned it. You're talking about international support. Before you go into a major operation like this, you have to make sure, in my opinion, that you have allies that are really ready to fight with you and that they understand your perspective. We didn't do that. We went on our own and we made a unilateral move or bilateral with Israel, and we just went to war. And now, Mr. Trump is president. He, has his perspectives and the way he sees things. But the issue of the day, if it were me, I would have made a little bit more of a diplomatic overture towards our allies. The entire world relies on the Strait of Hormuz to provide oil. 20% of the oil traffic in the world goes through there. And I would have made sure that our allies were very aware of what we were doing and what we had planned to do, and that they were on board with us. And right now, going the route that we did.
Sir, how would you do that? How would you initiate a diplomacy? What would your diplomacy sound like to your partners in, first of all, in NATO and of course in the Western alliances?
It would be less threatening. A lot less threatening. And remember, all the countries have diplomatic corps. They have, equivalents to the State Department, and they have ways to communicate that the average people would not understand. So that effort should have been worked out a long time ago. And some of the bellicose rhetoric that, even though I'm a big supporter of the president, but the rhetoric has to go, because it inflames the situation. It makes people angry, and we can't do things that way. It's not wise. In the meantime, I would have had my diplomats talking to NATO, to all the people that are affected by this, even some of the participants who get oil, even China. They get a lot of their oil from that area. So you want to give them a heads up. And as far as the Iranians, they knew that there was an impasse between the United States, Israel, and them, and we could have talked about that. Now, I'm not exactly sure what happened on the diplomatic side, but it seems that the rhetoric could have been toned down significantly.
So less threatening and more talking, right? Diplomacy.
Yes.
If you don't do that, we will do that. That's diplomacy, right? That's diplomacy.
That's diplomacy.
That's diplomacy. What precisely are the war's then core objectives? Neutralizing Iran's nuclear program, dismantling its ballistic missile arsenal, even though the president has said that he has obliterated Iran's nuclear program. And of course, collapsing the regime or merely restoring deterrence. And realistically, which of these are attainable in the near term, and which may prove illusory, even with sustained military pressure?
Well, again, you mentioned earlier the nuclear program. It's a threat that is measurable. If we can say that we destroyed their nuclear program, that's one thing right there. But right now, yes, we destroyed a lot of buildings, we destroyed a lot of people, we killed a lot of people, but the issue of the day is Iran is a very mountainous country. It's a place where you can hide a lot of things, and they don't see human life the way that we see it in the West. So them taking a lot of damage, they're run by a theocracy, and they don't see things the way we do. So again, destroying the nuclear program, stopping them from their terrorist threats because they've been funding proxy wars all over the globe. To tell you the truth, the Houthis and they've been launching missiles towards our bases and towards Israel and other of our allies and in the Gulf states. So that has to stop. But that's measurable right there, and we have to just make sure that comes to an end. And to me, those are the kinds of things that are measurable that we could say, hey, we stopped the missiles, we stopped the production of nuclear material. Those are things that we should consider to be a limited objective, and then we can go home. But this long-term idea of regime change, you should never try to change the regime in another country. It never works out.
At least not by weapon and war means of war.
You're correct.
There are stakes around energy choke points like Strait of Hormuz, as you said, and involvement, of course, of China, Russia, and the BRICS bloc. How might prolonged conflict reshape the global world order, supply chain alliances, petrodollar dominance, and does America, United States, risk handing strategic victories to our great power rivals while fighting in the Middle East? This is now geopolitics and economy.
Yeah, you mentioned the petrodollar, and people don't seem to understand that, we provide security for the Gulfy nations and that Strait of Hormuz, but oil is translated, or better yet, sold in dollars. So that gives the United States financial system enormous power. And if the BRICS nations end up using other denominations to trade in oil, it puts the United States in a tough position. So I think that plays a big part of it. And I think it's a big risk that we should engage in this. We should have probably thought this out a little bit more. But in the meantime, we're trying to maintain the system that we have, and I can understand where the president is going. But I also think that we could have done this diplomatically without killing people, without destroying property. And again, for example, those oil tankers, those mines cost about maybe less than $10,000 to deploy in the Strait of Hormuz in the water, and they just sit there and wait for oil tankers to come. They're a strategic threat because they can destroy one of those oil tankers, and now you're talking about billions of dollars lost, and you're also talking about the potential for an environmental disaster. It could be destroyed to the point where we can never use it again. So that's a huge risk to take, and we could have done this, I think, a little bit differently. I'm not in charge. I'm just giving you my personal opinion as someone who's actually been over there. We could have done this differently.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate your opinion, of course. And you have so much experience being in the Middle East and in Gulf, and from a veteran's perspective then, who has seen the human and fiscal toll of nation building. Especially we have to mention the 170 girls killed on the first day of this war with Iran. It hasn't really reached too many headlines around the world, unfortunately, but we have to think of that as well. What are the most plausible off-ramps or negotiated end states of this war that would secure U.S. interests without really repeating the open-ended commitments of, for example, Iraq or Afghanistan?
Well, to me, there needs to be a statement from the Iraqis that they will no longer pursue a nuclear threat.
Iran.
And I said Iraq, I meant Iran.
That is okay.
Yeah, please take that out. But the idea is they have to publicly state that. And also, the missiles have to stop flying. That has to happen. In the meantime, also, we have to be able to transport oil through the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, the United States doesn't get much of its petrochemicals and oil and natural gas through there, but the rest of the world does. And that's what this whole thing is about, maintaining the world's economy. And without that oil, it puts everything out of balance. So there has to be some sort of agreement between us and the Iranians that we're going to be able to transport oil through there and be able to do that safely. And people don't seem to understand, you could take an oil tanker through there right now and potentially get through. But the idea is the insurance companies that insure those billion-dollar oil tankers and their cargo, they won't insure the passage, and that's what this thing boils down to, is money and resources. So yeah, that has to happen, and yeah, it's very, very complicated, but both sides have to be willing to compromise at this point and stop shooting each other. That would definitely help.
I do have to say, in respect of that the official declaration of Iran as of early 2026 and years before was that Iran has consistently maintained that it does not pursue nuclear weapons, asserting that its nuclear program is designed solely for peaceful civilian purposes such as energy infrastructure. President Masoud Pezeshkian has stated that Iran has never sought and will never seek to build a nuclear bomb, and that the missiles that are flying right now is in defense according to the UN Charter, Chapter 5. What do you say to that?
To tell you the truth, I don't want to just flat out call them liars, but they're not telling the truth. They've been pursuing a nuclear bomb for a long time, and rightfully so. I mean, every country that doesn't seek to protect itself is a fool. Let's just face it. But to flat out and say they're not doing that, I don't believe that at all from my 34 years of being in this business. And if you look around, I mean, there's India, Pakistan, China, the United States, Russia, some say Israel. They all have nuclear weapons. England, France, South Africa. And the technology is getting to the point where it's transferable. And so for a country as advanced as Iran to say that they don't have nuclear weapons or they're not pursuing nuclear weapons is absolutely unrealistic. That doesn't make sense at all.
That's fair enough, sir. If the campaign achieves its stated military goals, yet leaves Iran's regime intact and its proxies emboldened, would you consider that a strategic success or a dangerous half measure? And what second and third order effect on regional stability and U.S. homeland security would you expect?
Well, let's tackle this first. To tell you the truth, with the technology the way it is, if we leave there in 6 to 8, maybe 6 to 8 months, they're going to reconstitute their ability to rebuild. They're going to start going back to doing the same things that they are, and we have to destroy everything or get a commitment from them that they won't pursue nuclear weapons. That's just the bottom line. They don't seem to care about their civilian population or their conventional military, but it's a very mountainous country with a lot of places to hide nuclear weapons, and we would have to send forth, I believe, inspectors, and in my opinion, international inspectors to make sure that they're not doing that. In the meantime, they don't, with all the oil that they have plenty of ways to produce energy and electricity. So the concept of nuclear is really not something that they really need. They can produce energy with all the oil that they produce, and the only reason they would need nuclear weapons, the only reason they would need nuclear energy is to produce nuclear weapons. Now, to the United States, we have a lot to lose. As I mentioned earlier, alluded to, we have the most technologically advanced society on the planet, but that also makes us very, very vulnerable. We do a lot of shipping. There's lots of ways to hide a dirty bomb. There's lots of ways to put in terrorist cells in the United States. We have 20 million people in the United States that aren't Americans and don't necessarily believe in the American way. So there's lots of ways to harm us if they wanted to. I wouldn't recommend that. But again, I've studied it, and that's a risk that we have to pay attention to. And it's a very expensive proposition as well. We are, as Americans, 38 trillion, almost $39 trillion in debt. And we don't need to be pursuing war at this point. We need to be taking care of our domestic responsibilities and paying our own personal bills. And we got to do better. We got to do better. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that we could do, but the main thing is that this nuclear threat is a worldwide threat. I'm glad that President Trump is pursuing this. I just wished he would be a little bit less bellicose about it.
Mr. Flauers, you're a combat veteran with nearly 21 years in the Air Force. You've been deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine. You have DHS experience, Pentagon, and now Republican candidate in the June 2026 primary for Maryland's 3rd Congressional District. What motivated you to transition from national defense and cybersecurity roles to running for Congress in a challenging Maryland district? And how do you plan to bring your America First perspective, particularly on the border security, energy independence, and confronting threats like Iran directly into legislation on Capitol Hill?
Thanks for asking. I, again, spent a lot of time in the military. I spent a lot of time at DHS. I spent a lot of time in 3-letter agencies. And when my experience came up with COVID, that's really what pushed me over the edge. Now, mind you, I had been in Afghanistan and I was working at DHS at the time, and I was seeing our borders literally open. And as you know, when you bring people into your country that don't believe in your values, it's going to be detrimental at some point, because a lot of people that were coming in don't understand Western civilization, and they don't understand. And so they were breaking the law. But more importantly, in my case, the real takeaway was the COVID jab. I just didn't believe. I don't care if people take the jab or not. I don't care if people take take it. But when the government starts telling you that you have to, I saw that as un-American. I saw that as un-Western. And
undemocratic, would you say?
Undemocratic. There you go. That's the number that's the word I'm looking for. So in 2022, I decided that I would leave and start running for office. And I live in a place that is very, very, very liberal. And my America First background is not very well liked here. But I really believe in our country. I believe in Western civilization. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. I've lived all over the world in different places. And what I saw was just a future that was very bleak unless I did something personally about it. So I decided to run, and I'm fighting a good fight. I'm trying to get support, but we have to protect Western civilization. And for example, I mean, and when you look at a lot of the countries that we're dealing with, you know, women's rights, for example, in Afghanistan, they, I've been over there. The women are not allowed to do a lot of different things. They're constantly wearing burqas. They have no real autonomy, and I don't want that for my daughter. I have a daughter. I have a son. I have grandchildren, and I want them to live in a free and open society. And everybody doesn't necessarily have to agree. But when we get to a point where we start forcing, inoculations on people, when we start forcing culture upon people, when we start allowing 20 million people to come into the United States and they're mostly on Social Security, that is unacceptable to me, and I will fight it as hard as I can.
That was very open from your end. Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Flauers. Thank you for this detailed analysis about war on Iran, and of course your personal experiences that you shared with us. Thank you for being with us.
Ika, I have nothing to hide, and I appreciate this opportunity. This is wonderful, and I thank you.
Appreciate it, sir. Retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Berni Flauers joined me from Columbia, Maryland. Stay with us. Četiri astronauta započela su visoko rizični let oko mjeseca. prvo putovanje čovečanstva prema mjesecu nakon više od pola stoljeća. To je uzbudljiv početak NASA-inog plana koji vodi ka ponovnom slijetanju na mjesec za 2 godine. Raketa visoka 32 sprata lansirana je u srijedu na večer iz svemirskog centra Kennedy na Floridi, noseći 3 Amerikanaca i 1 Kanađanina. Posada misije Artemis II provešće 1 dan u orbiti oko Zemlje, provjeravajući svoju kapsulu prije nego što aktivira glavni motor koji će ih poslati prema mjesecu. Tokom gotovo 10-dnevne misije obići će mjesec, postaviti rekord u udaljenosti leta, a zatim se direktno vratiti kući na Zemlju.
But there was a moment about an hour ago where Mission Control Houston reoriented our spacecraft as the sun was setting behind the Earth. And I don't know what we all expected to see in that moment, but you could see the entire globe from pole to pole. You could see Africa, Europe, and if you looked really close, you could see the northern lights. It was the most spectacular moment, and it paused all 4 of us in our tracks.
One of the biggest surprises was how smooth riding those solids was. We all expected a really just dynamic ride, a lot of motion. We were prepared to potentially not being able to see telemetry, maybe even not being able to, touch switches, and it was very smooth. It was a definite difference when they separated and we were just on the main engines, but just a steady rumble and a great ride.
10, 9, 8, 7, RS-25 engines lit. 4, 3, 2, 1, booster ignition, and liftoff. The crew of Artemis II now bound for the moon. Humanity's next great voyage begins.
Good roll pitch.
Roger, roll pitch.
Toliko u Pulsu planete za ovu sedmicu. Ove ostale vijesti možete i dalje potražiti na našem sajtu newsmax balkans.com. Ne minajte kanal, mi se vidimo naredne sedmice.